Hello, I'm Emma Griffin. I'm a Professor of Modern British History at the University of East Anglia, and I'm going to be talking in these sessions about the Industrial Revolution, in particular what the social impact, what the social consequences were of industrialisation. So it probably makes sense to start by clarifying a little bit what we mean with this expression, the Industrial Revolution. So the term itself was invented or kind of coined in the 19th century, and it actually came from Europe. It was kind of French and Belgian writers who looked at Britain, saw some changes had happened, and recognised that it was kind of connected with the economy and with the world of work, and they coined this expression, the Industrial Revolution, and it was a kind of parallel to the French political revolution, the French Revolution. It was a kind of a new way of thinking about revolutions, if you like. Now, through most of the 19th century and all through what we now describe as the Industrial Revolution, people in Britain didn't think that they were living through an industrial revolution. They just didn't have the word, and they didn't really conceptualise what was happening in this way. But through the 20th century, the idea of an industrialisation really entered the vocabulary, and it's remained with us ever since. And of course, there's been lots of debates about between historians about what the Industrial Revolution was and when it happened, and whether the phrase is exactly the right phrase to encapsulate what was happening. But despite all of these debates, there's it kind of maintains its place in our historical understanding, because there is this belief that something really significant happened to the British economy and to the British society during this time, and it deserves a special phrase and a special expression of its own. So that's the term Industrial Revolution. What do we mean? Well, historians do interpret it in different ways, but for me, the way of understanding the industrialisation is really thinking about a change in the way in which human beings provide for themselves. So it's helpful to provide an example of the pre-industrial economy. How does a pre-industrial economy work? Well, all pre-industrial economies are slightly different, but essentially what people are doing they are taking things out of the land, working the land, and turning them things into useful things for themselves. Though most obviously food, but also all of their clothing as well. So people are wearing woolen clothes that are woven from the sheep that they keep, or they're wearing linen clothes. They grow flax and they turn the flax into fibres, and then they weave the fibres and they make them into clothes. Leather, it comes from the shoe, it comes from the animals around you. So really everything that is being used in a society in some way comes out of the ground and is linked to what the natural environment can provide. So different parts of the world will use different kinds of products. So in Italy it's olive oil, and up in Russia there's lots of wood that's abundant. In India they're growing cotton, and that's the clothing that they wear. So every country makes do with what it can produce and what it can grow locally. And so I suppose the Industrial Revolution is when we really move away from living in this kind of way, where we grow things and we make them useful, and we wear them and eat them and consume them all on a very kind of small local scale. It's a switch away from that kind of way of working, and it's a move towards using machines to mass produce things, but it's also about using resources that come from far and wide. So our British Industrial Revolution, for example, was all based on cotton. You can't grow cotton, obviously, in Britain. You can have flax, you can use wool, but you can't grow cotton. So that was all shipped in absolutely phenomenal quantities from other parts of the globe. So we're starting to manufacture things during the Industrial Revolution, not simply for ourselves because we need clothes to wear, but we're starting to manufacture things on a massive scale so that we can sell them and so that we can profit from them. So it's a very different kind of relationship, a very different motivation for making things. The other thing that's very significant about the Industrial Revolution is because you're going to be doing much more making of things, you also need a lot more power to do all of that making. So if we think back again to the pre-industrial economy, everything that we wear is produced by hand. So we grow the flax in the field, and that's all kind of a hand process. We spread it out and we spin it. We might use a spinning wheel we might use machines to help us, but they're very small, hand-powered machines. And then of course we weave the yarn by hand, and we sew the clothes by hand. Obviously that's not how we have our clothes today, not how we procure our clothes today. Very, very different. But because you're making things on a much bigger scale, obviously there's a lot of machinery involved, and one of the hallmarks of industrialisation, wherever it occurs, is machinery. So this work starts to stop being done by people, often inside their homes, and is done by machines instead. And as the machines get bigger, you need lots of power for the machines. So in Britain, we had a lot of power in the form of coal. So we start exploiting coal in much larger ways than previously. We start to consume much more coal. But it doesn't have to be coal. Other parts of the world have industrialised on the back of oil and electricity. Electricity sometimes derived from rivers, for example. So it doesn't actually have to be coal, although that's absolutely the hallmark of the British Industrial Revolution. But there's certainly a demand for much more power than can be created by traditional means. So I suppose this is just a way of saying that the Industrial Revolution really is a change. I mean, the whole motivation of manufacturing. So societies have always done some manufacturing, but what they were doing traditionally was growing and producing goods and then turning them into useful items like shoes, houses, carts, clothes that they needed in order to go about their daily business. And what's happening with the Industrial Revolution is all of that work is starting to be done by large, powered machines, and it's being done not so that we can simply have clothes and things to eat, but so that we can create a massive surplus and we can sell that surplus for profit.